right, here's the conclusion. It does seem to be true that Trump signed the Insurrection Act. Yes. I know that rumor had been floating around all day yesterday and all night last night and so on. I could not confirm that for like 16 hours or so, and I still haven't been able to absolutely confirm it, but I believe it has been signed. However, and this is the big caveat that no one else is talking about. However, the top military generals are refusing to follow the Insurrection Act orders unless Trump gives them what they want. And what they want is war with China. And so what's actually happening right now is that there is a mad negotiation underway. And that negotiation may be finished by the time you hear this. But it's a negotiation where the military leaders, there's two things going on. Number one, just like everybody else in Washington, they want to loot the country before the collapse. Everybody knows there's an economic collapse, a dollar collapse that's coming. That's going to happen whether it's under Trump or Biden. Doesn't matter who's in the White House. The economic collapse is almost here. Everybody in Washington wants to loot the whole system to the max before that collapse happens. And that includes people in the Pentagon who are really good at looting, weapons manufacturers and analysts and contractors and so on. They're all looting the system. Frankly, almost everybody who lives in the DC area is a looter. They're looting the whole country. And this is their big final act of looting of the empire before the empire collapses financially. Doesn't mean it's over for America. It just means that it's going to have to be reborn with a new honest money system that maybe I'll have a chance to talk about that later. But that's just one of the two factors that the top military people have in mind right now. The other factor, which is more of an ethical factor, is that they see China as a very real, very extreme threat to the United States, and they do want the U.S. to initiate military aggression towards China. Maybe that's not the right way to put it. They want China to attack the U.S. so that they can respond. They want to be in a regional war with China. In other words, they want to destroy China's ability to continue to build more aircraft carriers, because China is in the process of constructing an aircraft carrier factory that would churn out a major, top class aircraft carrier about every, I think, 2 years or so, or 18 months, something like that. And once that goes online, the clock is ticking. Another aircraft carrier every 1 to 2 years, something like that. China will very quickly just swamp or dwarf the United States in terms of its ability to project military power overseas or across the globe. And aircraft carriers, and I don't mean just aircraft carriers, but really carrier groups. So, there's a lot of ships that go with that, destroyers and subs and so on. But China is very good at manufacturing, and they've stolen so many secrets from the United States that the top people in the military here in the United States know that if they don't cripple China's military output capabilities now, then China will overshadow America's military might very, very quickly within the next decade, within the 2020s for sure. So they want Trump to agree to allow the military to engage China in some way. And if you don't believe me on that point, there was something that just happened that you can confirm in the media that is just, it's mind-blowing. Well, there are actually two things that happened that are mind-blowing that will confirm this. Okay, the first is that, and this was reported by the Epoch Times, areas across 7 Chinese provinces enter wartime mode following COVID-19 outbreaks. So China is putting its own population and provinces into a state of war, and it's using COVID as the excuse. Well, gosh, I thought China had conquered COVID. Remember the New Year's Eve photos from China? They were all out in the streets and, partying and celebrating. Because they had succeeded in releasing the bioweapon to harm the West. And the West was locked down, and the West was economically crippled by it, talking about Europe and the United States. But China knew that the virus really wasn't as fatal anymore because of the mutations and the host adaptation over time makes it less dangerous. So China was out in the streets on New Year's Eve while America was all locked down, especially New York City. And then now, all of a sudden, China is locking down 7 provinces in a state of war and saying it's COVID, right? I don't buy that. But the second thing, which is actually bigger, is that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo essentially announced an end of the one China policy. And this involves Taiwan. And you may know the United States is sending an official, I forgot the woman's name or what exactly she represents, but a U.S. official is on her way to Taiwan. And it will be the first official visit onto the Taiwan island by a U.S. official in since the 1970s, right? Since Richard Nixon switched recognition to mainland China. But Mike Pompeo, who is a patriot and who is on Trump's team here, Mike Pompeo announced an end to the one China policy. Now, China's one China policy, just so you understand that, China insists that there's only one China and that Taiwan is a renegade province of China. In other words, China claims that the communist CCP owns and controls Taiwan. But Taiwan considers itself to be its own country, which it is. And, I lived there for a couple of years. And Taiwan is like it's like the pro-liberty, it's like the Texas version of Asia, you might say. Taiwan people are great. They use free market principles. They have democratic elections, and they want nothing to do with the communists in China. And China's plan has always been to invade and conquer Taiwan. And Richard Nixon, during his administration, he switched recognition to communist China because Nixon was actually working for the globalists to move us toward where we are today, which is a global lockdown under communism and tyranny. And Richard Nixon also took us off the gold standard for our currency, which was another move desired by the globalists and the central banks. It was all by design, you see. And ever since that day, Taiwan has been, vilified and bullied by China. And the United States had only recognized one China ever since that day, until now. And communist China is infuriated by this move by Pompeo. They're so infuriated by it. I mean, China likes to be the bully of the world, and they can't stand that this is happening. They hate the fact that this is happening. It's enough to get them to attack Taiwan or attack a U.S. naval warship near Taiwan, isn't it? Oh, interesting. So Mike Pompeo, who had talked about Trump continuing in Trump's second term, remember he said, there's going to be a smooth transition to Trump's second term. Mike Pompeo makes a decision that blows the lid off of China's patience and in effect provokes China into attacking the United States at the same time that naval ships and aircraft are flying and going through disputed territory, which is technically international waters, but it's territory that China claims to be its own. So the American military is very busy trying to get China to attack us. And I just described the ways that's happening. And then China is in fact preparing for war. China's preparing not only its own populations in those provinces, which includes Beijing, by the way, but also you may recall in a previous situation update from, a few days ago, a week ago, that Chinese leader Xi had told his troops to prepare for war with the United States. They know what's about to happen. So really where we are right now, as best I can tell, assessing information from multiple sources, just to review here again, is that yes, the Insurrection Act has been signed by Trump. but no one will implement it unless they get what they want. That is, no one in the Pentagon will implement it. And by the way, Trump will never have the very top generals on his side, like Milley and so on. He'll never have them, but he doesn't need all of them. He only needs enough to carry out the Insurrection Act. And if the Pentagon gets what it wants, then they will pressure Milley and others to accept the Trump deal. And the Trump deal would be something like this. And this is the good news and the bad news. So here's kind of how I think the Trump Pentagon deal would be structured. And by the way, in Washington, D.C., everything's for sale. Okay? Everything is a negotiation. Everything is a payoff. This is probably what frustrates the heck out of Trump. He's in there trying to do what's right for America. He's the only one in D.C. trying to do what's right. Everybody else in D.C. is just they got their hands out, pay me off, give me this, give me that, give us what we want. For the most part, that's all that D.C. is. So Trump is in a negotiation, and he's got to give the Pentagon what they want. And what they want is not just war with China, but they want the U.S. economy to be redirected into a wartime mode, where a significant portion of the entire economy, and especially the money printing, is directed into the military. In the same way that Big Pharma wants to basically own the entire U.S. economy, and Big Pharma wants everybody to be sick and everybody to be vaccinated. Big Pharma loves the bioweapons and the coronavirus because they get to loot the economy. With government, there's already been hundreds of billions of dollars in grant money to the drug companies for these vaccines recently. And more, quote, research into preventing biological attacks. Well, that's just bioweapons research with a pretty sounding name. But just as Big Pharma wants to loot the economy, and they've done a very good job of looting it, the Pentagon wants to loot the economy. It's the old military industrial complex that previous presidents have warned us about. It's a very real thing, and they want their slice of the pie, especially since the pie is about to disappear, because everybody knows the system's going down. Again, why do you think Bitcoin is skyrocketing? People are bailing into Bitcoin. In other words, bailing out of the dollar into Bitcoin, anything that they think can hold value, which, again, gold and silver might be a better choice for most people, but whatever. I'm not going to get into the financial details in this podcast. So the Trump deal with the Pentagon is going to look like this. The Pentagon will say, okay, Trump, we'll give you your Insurrection Act. We'll agree to go round up the traitors. We'll agree to make sure that America doesn't get turned over to the CCP agents like Biden and the Democrats and so on. But in return, you're going to have to give us, the Pentagon, you're going to have to give us perpetual war with China. You're going to have to direct trillions of dollars to us because we're going to be fighting an endless war. Because you see the war with terrorism, Middle East terrorism, I should say, is largely over, and Trump had been pulling the troops out of that. And as much as the warmongers had tried to continue that war, there just wasn't a big enough justification for it. And Trump, in a big way, had become the anti-war president. And this is why Bolton hated Trump and turned on Trump, and many people in the military, because Trump wouldn't go to war. Because Trump doesn't believe in war. Trump believes in economics as a way to beat the enemy. But the Pentagon people believe that war is necessary to defeat China. And by the way, they may be correct. They may be more right than Trump on this issue. It's hard to know. But China is a huge threat to the world. And if the U.S. Pentagon wants to go after China and take down the CCP, they actually have a point, I mean, the CCP is the greatest danger to the world, and they've infiltrated the United States, and they've enslaved their own people, and they run organ harvesting, and they enslave entire ethnic groups such as the Uyghurs there, and they run slave camps, and China provides the funding for Apple and Google and Twitter and Facebook, and they pay millions to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and CNN and all this stuff. So really, if you think about it, the Pentagon and Trump have the same end goal, which is to protect America from this big threat. They just disagree on the way to do it. And Trump, I think, doesn't want to risk what would happen in America if we go to war with China, because that would be a world war. And what if that world war goes nuclear? Then we all lose, right? So Trump doesn't necessarily want that. At least this is in my assessment. Obviously, I don't speak for him, and I'm just taking my best guess at where I think he is with this. Trump wants peace. You know, he wants peace and prosperity. The Pentagon wants to go in and freaking blow apart Beijing, which, you know, again, is, if they focus on just taking out the communist leadership, that's not a bad idea at all. We don't want to harm the Chinese people. We want to free the Chinese people. But in order to do that, you got to take out the CCP. So my assessment of where this is going to end up is that they will reach a deal. I think they've already reached a deal, frankly. We just don't know about it yet. We'll probably never know. You know, this isn't the kind of stuff they issue a press release. But they're going to reach a deal, or they already have, and then Trump's going to be given the go. So when everybody is out there saying, yeah, Trump has signed the Insurrection Act, that's true, but it doesn't mean anything unless the military is willing to enforce it.